youngest driver in the field at 24 years of age has won at Indianapolis.
The Verizon IndyCar Series on IndyCar Radio. IndyCar Radio on the IMS Radio Network.
Here we are in victory lane for the glorious phase of this most spectacular finish of the 500-mile automobile race. And the pit crew and the men are gathering around Jim Rathman here. And Jim has a big ice-cold bottle of milk, and let's talk with him. Just a minute, Jim. Come on. The pit crew is really gathering around him, and Julie Pratt, the queen of the 500 Festival, has put the garland of flowers around his neck. And just a minute, he's going to have another drink of that ice-cold milk. Jim? Just a minute. Here we are, Jim, right over here. Jim, how do you feel after that most spectacular finish?
Pretty good. What happened to Ward?
You ran out of gas. You and Roger really put on a spectacular finish today. Jim. What do you got to say?
Stay tuned for more on IndyCar Radio. From the Pocono Raceway in Long Pond, Pennsylvania, this is the Verizon IndyCar Series on the Advance Auto Parts IndyCar Radio Network.
Well, Mid-Ohio seems like a month ago, quite frankly. Just a couple of weeks, though, since Joseph Newgarden took control of the 2017 Verizon IndyCar Series Championship. We'll see if that's a precursor of things to come. Cars leaving pit road as we speak here at Pocono, this bad, fast, tricky triangle. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Advanced Auto Parts IndyCar Radio Network. Happy to have you back with us. Happy to be joined in the booth by Nick Yeoman. And Nick, when the dust settled on Mid-Ohio, as we mentioned, for the first time in his brief but very, very successful Verizon IndyCar Series career, Joseph Newgarden finds himself the championship leader.
And what a hot stretch that the Hendersonville, Tennessee driver has been on over the last month and a half of the season. You mentioned the win at Mid-Ohio. That was after a win at Toronto. 2 previous races before that, a 6th at Iowa and a 2nd at Road America. So that young American driver, Mark, I think expectations were kind of up in the air about what to expect from him in year 1 at Team Penske. But with 4 races to go, Mark, he's got the championship lead. He's got quite a few drivers breathing down his neck, and this thing is far from over. But what a stretch the American Joseph Newgarden has been on, as he'll try to go for a 3rd straight win and 4th of the season here at Pocono.
Usually by this time of the year, it comes down to 2, maybe 3 drivers. But while 19 drivers are mathematically eligible, I think we talked about it Mid-Ohio, when your name is mentioned in terms of being mathematically in contention, that usually means you're out of contention.
Yeah.
It means you the slimmest of chances. But, boy, just in front of those 19 drivers, Joseph Newgarden leads Elio by 7 points. Scott Dixon was your points leader. A disastrous weekend for him at a place he's been so dominant, Mid-Ohio. He's 8 back. Pagano 17 back. Will Power 52 back. And Newgarden leads Rahal by 58 points. And by the way, Will Power at this point a year ago was 58 points back. It was in contention, breathing down the neck of Simon Pagano up until the weekend at Sonoma. So let's face it, Nick, this championship far from decided, but your opportunity to score points, there aren't a lot of those left. Just about 3 or 4 races left.
Yeah, race by race, we've kind of been watching those drivers that are 5th, 6th, and 7th. Power, Rahal, Sato, they've all kind of been 50, 60, 70 points behind. And you mentioned it, as you get towards the end of the season, you start running out of races where you can make those big jumps because the drivers like Joseph Newgarden, Elio Castroneves, Scott Dixon, and Simon Pagano simply don't make the mistakes to allow you to have big weekends. So for guys like Will Power, Graham Rahal, they need another big weekend. They cannot afford a single mistake if they want to have a chance, as you mentioned, Mark, mathematically, to be in this thing at Sonoma.
Interesting to note that at a very important time of the championship, we're going back-to-back ovals, and those oval purists have to be awfully happy that ovals are figuring this prominently into the championship this late in the season.
And boy, those two ovals could not be any more different as we come to this massive 2.5-mile triangle here in Pocono, Pennsylvania, which is certainly a challenge for these drivers as all 3 of the corners are banked vastly differently. And then you got, we'll go to Gateway as IndyCar returns there for the first time in many, many years. That racetrack was just recently paved. Drivers were very, very positive reviews from the repave at Gateway. That's going to be a fun racetrack. That's kind of an unknown because a lot of the drivers in this series don't have any experience racing there. So back-to-back ovals, Mark, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to see a lot of passing, and it's pretty cool the way this season ends up here. 4 races in 5 weeks, and we're going to crown a champion.
We are off to a gorgeous start on this day here at Pocono, and to kind of reaffirm that, let's welcome in the sports director at the ABC affiliate WRTV6 in Indianapolis. Let's say good morning to Dave first.
And good morning. Great to be back at the Tricky Triangle here in Long Pond, Pennsylvania, where traditionally we get a little bit of everything when it comes to conditions, and these race crews have already experienced a lot of that. Yesterday, obviously no track activity, but it was set up day for all the teams involved in the Verizon IndyCar Series. So when they arrived here, overcast conditions, then we saw some fog, and then it rained last night. When we arrived this morning, the track dryers were out. Obviously the track now clean and green, good to go. We hope for the rest of the weekend here. And because of that, guess what? Barely a cloud in the sky now. Air temperature at 69 degrees. Track temperature, it'll go up, just starting at 79 degrees here this morning. Humidity levels pretty high for Pocono at 82%. We've already completed the install laps for the most part. 1 lap around, bring it back in, just make sure everything's hooked up correctly. But it's great to be back at a track where we're going in excess of 220 miles an hour. Love coming to the Tricky Triangle here in Pocono.
Nick, we must say thank you to Dave for allowing us to be part of his video diary yesterday in our travels to Gettysburg, which aired on his station in Indianapolis. Or if you follow Dave on Twitter, maybe you saw that today. It was good stuff for sure. We had a great time. A lot of news since we left Mid-Ohio. We'll get to some of that momentarily, but a team that has been here sporadically throughout the year in the series, but has made the most of it when they are here. Talking about Harding Racing and their driver, Gabby Chavez. We welcome in Jake Query with that story. Jake?
Good morning, Mark. It's interesting. For the lack of experience this team might have in terms of the 2017 season, it is more than made up for in terms of experience just working and overlooking that car for Gabby Chavez. We're talking about Harding Racing. Mike Harding is on the fruit stand right now as Gabby Chavez is out on the track with that number 88 machine, but he's flanked by a couple of guys that know a lot about making sure these cars are set up and guiding Gabby Chavez as well in terms of driving through it. Talking about Larry Curry, also Allenser Jr., the 2-time Indianapolis 500 winner, continues to work with Gabby Chavez as a driving coach for the team. Now look at what they've done this year. This is just the third outing for the team, but Gabby Chavez, both times he has gone out, has been able to bring the car home in a top 10 finish. At Indianapolis, finishing 9th after starting in the 25th position, then starting 20th in Texas. And keep in mind that just keeping the car clean at Texas was challenge enough. There was so much that went on over the course of that race. Gabby Chavez did exactly that and brought the car home 5th. Alonso Jr. told me during the month of May that he has been very, very impressed by the young driver just in terms of his ability to keep both his ears and eyes open in learning and taking in everything that's been taught to him. So that Chevrolet right now out on the track, it is car number 88. The thought process, and we'll try to talk to Mike before the end of this session, but of course they've been talking and aiming, Mark, about trying to become full-time for the 2017 Verizon IndyCar Series, or excuse me, 2018 schedule. And then, of course, for this year, it was work some of the ovals as they've come along. That, of course, means a super speedway here in Pocono, and we'll be interested to see what Gabby Chavez is able to do.
Thanks, Jake. And, of course, Jake, author of Tuesdays with Jake. You can catch that weekly on IndyCar.com. Also, the co-host of Query and Schultz on 97.5 and 1260 WNDE in Indianapolis. So, Nick Yeoman, just to follow up on Jake's report about Harding Racing and Gabby Chavez, I think you have to continue to be impressed with the efforts that they put forth. I mean, incredible performance started off the year for them at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and it just appears to be one of those instances where everyone from the engineers to the crew chief to the driver all got up to speed, were very, very comfortable, very familiar with one another from the get-go.
Yeah, that fit just seems right, doesn't it, as Gabby Chavez is out on the racetrack, making his way out of turn 3, running with Ed Jones there, a couple Indy Lights champions down the front straightaway. But yeah, that partnership has worked really, really well, and Gabby's just the type of guy that what we've seen so far, he just takes care of the race car, doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And as a new team, when you're trying to gather that data and you just want to put in laps so you can work towards the future, as Jake talked about, they're planning on going full-time racing in 2018. Nothing official yet. That's what you're looking for. Gabby's done a really nice job, as you mentioned, a very quiet and efficient top 10 at the Indianapolis 500, and then at the race at Texas, he avoided the carnage, and there was a lot of it, and brought that car home in a top 5. So that's a great start. Love the fact that Al Unser Jr. is involved in that team. Larry Curry's a smart guy, has been around the sport for a long time, and I'm looking forward to it, Mark. I hope that they can get all the ducks in a row and that they can go full-time racing in 2018 to bring in some new blood from the ownership standpoint. That's always what the series is looking for.
The other story involves Mikel Aloshin, the 7 car of Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports. And, Nick, we remember a couple of races ago when Mikel Aloshin was out of the car. Sebastian Saavedra jumped in it. Then Mikel back in the car at Mid-Ohio. We know how that ended, but more struggles for Mikel Aloshin. And then just a few days ago, it was announced that at least for the next couple of races, Sebastian Saavedra is back in that 7 machine. So I guess that firmly places him in the middle of all the silly season conversation.
Yeah, I think Sebastian said this week that he realizes that this is a great audition process for him to try to maybe line up a ride for 2018. Frustrating and I know disappointing end of the year for Mikel Aloshin. A lot of mistakes, and and you heard it in Mid-Ohio, Mark, when he wrecked in practice. In his voice, you could kind of tell that he knew that the writing might be on the wall, especially after he was, essentially benched at Toronto to put Sebastian Saavedra in that race car. So that's kind of a fluid situation. The long-term status of that 7 car is certainly up in the air. Sebastian Saavedra is going to pilot it for the next couple races. And again, hopefully Mikel Aloshin finds his way back to the Verizon IndyCar Series. He's a likable guy. Certainly he brings a lot of personality. But I think it was pretty obvious, and I think Sam Schmidt said it, that if the results were going to be there, they needed to go in a different direction. And that's what that team's choosing to do. While
Davey Hamilton is not with us this weekend, and we'll miss Davey's contributions for sure. We've been pretty lucky over the past couple of years to have a more than capable fill-in for him. He's with us this weekend, and as I mentioned after Barber earlier this year, Zach Veach, no longer do you have to qualify your thoughts and observations about this series by saying, well, I've never really driven one of these cars in this situation before, because now you have, after your start at Barber on the road course there, and of course the Indianapolis 500. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. It's great to be back here with you guys. And man, it's just beautiful seeing Pocono from this high up in the radio booth. I mean, it really gives you a lay of the land. And when you're strapped in the race car, you don't realize what's outside of the racetrack. You just focus on, where you want to go. So to be up here is a cool perspective. And like you said, yeah, it's nice to have some IndyCar experience now where when I see these guys running around or trying to observe something, I can put myself right in their spot and understand what they're working through. And especially with it being a 500-mile race here come Sunday or tomorrow, there's a lot that you have to work through, and it takes a long time to get those miles down.
I'm guessing that from your perspective, there's probably not much of a difference between the desire to do this the first time and then the need, want, and desire to be able to do it again. I would imagine both are very, very taxing on you emotionally.
Well, I think both of it keeps growing. Once you get that first one out of the way, you just want to keep doing it. And we were talking about Gabby Chavez, and he's somebody that both him and I have kind of leaned on each other at times of our career that's not exactly where we wanted to be. And he goes, dude, as soon as you get that one race down, you think, oh, I just want to do the Indy 500. And at that point, if that's the way things work out, I could be happy with getting to do it. And, he's like, no, you do your first Indy 500, then you want to do your first full season. You do your first full season, then you want to win a championship. And that's the way it needs to be if you want to be competitive. You always got to be hungry for more.
Well, and I'm sure Nick and I alluded to this, and I'm sure you can relate to it with the various stops on the Mazda Road to Indy that you made along that ladder series. I won't call it dumb luck, but I'll say it's very, very fortunate that clearly all the pieces and parts fit together there at Harding Racing nicely, and they got up to speed, got comfortable with one another very, very soon.
Most definitely. I think the one thing that shows how well that team's working, as we talked about earlier, is that this is just the third race for them this season, and to see what they've done at the Indy 500, and of course the Texas Motor Speedway is crazy of a race that is. I give Texas more on Gabby's shoulders than anything, because he did keep that car out of trouble, but they're doing a great job, and I really do hope to get to see him go full-time racing next year, because that's something he deserves, and I think the team can give him the opportunity to have the best run like any other would.
15 minutes into the session, Marco Andretti is P1, Hildebrand, Castro Neves, Dixon, Ryan Hunter-Ray, the top five, and Zach, an interesting schedule this weekend. I mean, you get a practice session under your belt, albeit a lengthy one, then you get a little bit of a break, and then you go qualifying. So you need to maximize the amount of time that you have available on the racetrack today.
It's a quick turnaround, isn't it? I look at this kind of schedule, and we used to have this somewhat of a schedule in Indy Lights when we came here, and it's great for the veterans because you've ran here before, you have a lot of laps, you can get out there, get the car diagnosed quickly, and then you can just start thinking about qualifying, because you have that 30-minute session this evening that you can kind of work on your race car, although the conditions won't be equivalent to what the race is, but it gives you an idea. But for the rookies coming in here, when you're still trying to learn this place in an IndyCar as well as get comfortable with the car and figure out what you have to do to qualifying, I think that hour seems pretty short.
What impresses you the most about this racetrack?
For me, it's just how diverse you have to be. You go to Indianapolis and all four corners are different in a way, but at the end of the day, they're still similar. And you come here and turn one's completely different from two is completely different from three, and the car behaves, three different ways throughout a lap here. So you'll constantly find yourself, adjusting, working with your tools, and not only from lap to lap, but corner to corner. There's times when we got the pole here in Indy Lights that, the bars were complete opposite in turn one as what they were in turn three. So you just got to constantly be thinking about what the wind's doing around here as well as your race car, and what you can do to make the car just get through the corner a little more comfortably.
Lift it all here, or just maybe in turn one?
Well, I think if your car's working well, it's going to be flat, and that's the daunting thing, because to me, on any of the speedways I've ran on, the most frightening corner has been turn one here at Pocono when I first came here, just because it's got so much banking that when you fall into it, it literally feels like you're falling into the middle of the corner, because turn one, the entry's so high, so much banking down to the apex that it really gives you an idea of like, wow, this is a steep corner. But once you get comfortable with it, it's something that you actually enjoy going through.
Nick, you might have the best perspective of anyone here from your position in turn one, because when they cross the start-finish line, you've seen them 5, 6, 7 wide, but they all find a way to get themselves into some semblance of order by the time they get to turn one.
Yeah, talk about rolling and falling into that corner. It's a pretty cool vantage point from I've got up there on top of a billboard in turn number one, and it is amazing the way that they can get those cars on this flat straightaway to arc it into turn one, which again has some really strong banking, and then it's a tighter turn, and watching these drivers rotate those cars off of the corner as well, trying to get down towards the tunnel turn is very daunting as well. But it is a cool perspective, and it's one of the most challenging corners that Zach alluded to on the entire IndyCar circuit. And all three of these corners, Mark, they're just so different that I just imagine it creates such a challenge, not only for the drivers, but for these race engineers to set these cars up to make sure that they can handle all three corners because they are vastly different, and it makes for really intriguing racing throughout the course of the day.
I know there's about 700 feet difference between the front stretch and the back stretch. Zach, which one's faster?
I'd say for sure the front straightaway here, and just I was going to touch on that as well. The best part for me about Pocono is always that view from the start.
Yeah.
You know, cars are lined up. The front straightaways here so wide that you'll see cars 8 wide, it looks like, charging into turn one, and you just don't get that kind of spectacle at any other racetrack.
Since Nazareth went away Dave first, this is the closest thing to home cooking for Andretti Autosport. Michael Andretti, essentially their home track here at Pocono.
If it's Pennsylvania, it's definitely an Andretti. We're sitting here watching Marco Andretti, Ryan Hunter-Reay, of course, Michael Andretti keeping things in charge of what's going on with the 28. Do you love coming back to Pocono? What does this place mean to your family?
Well, definitely it's great to be back. I mean, we're only half an hour from Nazareth, which obviously just makes this our home race, which is huge. And on top of it, it's a great racetrack. It's just, as a driver, it's really fun to drive. And I think for the fans, it gives a great show. So, it's always good coming here.
I know setup and balance is so key with these cars. How do you manage that, though, at a track that has three distinctly different corners?
In reality, it's just a compromise. It's hard to get it perfect. When you get it right in turn one, it messes up turn three if you get it perfect. So you gotta live with something that's not quite perfect all the way around.
Is there a favorite corner for you here?
I don't know. I guess turn one. You got to really suck it up when you're going down there after that long straightaway.
Tell me about the season a little bit. Where are you guys? Obviously, time's ticking for you guys to make a charge at a championship.
Yeah, well, it's definitely disappointing in terms of the results. The encouraging thing is we've been really competitive, but we've just been having pretty horrible luck since Indy. But, hopefully we can turn around here in the end and get a few wins before the end of it.
Does it feel like home?
Here in Pocono?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it seems like I've been coming here my whole life.
Well, your dad won in '86. You've got a pole here. A lot of history, obviously, with your family and this great facility. Yeah,
for sure. There is, and like I said, I've been coming here since back when it was a Schaefer 500 back in the early 70s. So I was only like 10 years old back then, and I raced go-karts here back then at about the same time. So, like I said, my whole life I've been coming here.
Has anyone asked you about the engine manufacturer for next year yet?
Nobody's asked me that yet, no.
Really?
No.
You want to reveal anything here?
Still working on it.
Have a great homecoming.
Thank you.
Michael Andretti, again, helping call the shots for the 28, as the other cars as well. Definitely a great homecoming whenever they can come back here to Pennsylvania.
Nick, no question, that's been as much a part of this quote-unquote silly season discussion as anything, I think, that the fact that they may actually move to Chevrolet next year.
All indications are, for those that really dive deep and cover this stuff, guys like Marshall Pruitt and Robin Miller from Racer Magazine, they've been keeping their ear to the wind. Everyone kind of sees the decision by Michael Andretti of whether he's going to switch from Honda to Chevrolet as the first domino, and the biggest domino that's going to set off a trigger of events and ultimately some big decisions by some of the other teams as to which drivers go where. Obviously, if Andretti Autosport makes the move from Honda to Chevrolet, Takuma Sato is going to be looking for a new ride. There's some talk that Alexander Rossi, that Honda really likes him, that he may be looking for another ride. So there are a lot of dominoes, Mark, and I'm not sure anyone's quite sure exactly who's going to be racing where, except for a handful of spots. The ones you can expect. Joseph Newgarden's not going anywhere. Scott Dixon's not going anywhere. Simon Pagenaud, Will Power aren't going anywhere. A lot of the other seats in the IndyCar paddock, Mark, are certainly up in the air. Let's go back to pit lane and check in once again with Jake Query.
And one of those that will really be up in the air, and perhaps we are witnessing, matter of fact, not even perhaps, I think it's a certainty that we're witnessing an audition for that. Sebastian Saavedra will pilot that number 7 Lucas Oil Aero machine for Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports here at Pocono, as he did in Toronto. Now, this is the seat, of course, that was vacated by Mikhail Aleshin with the announcement this week that Aleshin will now focus on the sports car development side of things. And so as a result of that, that number 7 machine becomes open not only for the remainder of this season, but also for the 2018 season as well. Saavedra will be in it for this race and then as well for Gateway. Now, at the end of the season, in terms of once the season caps off at Sonoma, the thought process is that Saavedra then will be out of the machine. So he knows that this is an opportunity for him to try to do what he can to impress the team. He was very good at Toronto. He started 20th and finished 9th. He is a veteran, of course, of the Verizon IndyCar Series. Saavedra knows that this is an opportunity for him to make the most of it. But Nick, Mark, Zach, you can bet with a team like Sam Schmidt and the fact that you would have a partnership theoretically with another free agent, but let's just say for the sake of argument that James Hinchcliffe returns to that team, that makes it a pretty coveted seat. So you can bet that Sebastian Saavedra is going to try to make the most of being the first to get an opportunity to audition, but you can also rest assured there will be plenty who will throw their hat in that ring.
Well, one thing's for sure, the guy sitting next to us working with us as our driver analyst this weekend in for Davey Hamilton, Zach Veach. You know a little bit about all of this, in the midst of it right now, in fact. And I got to imagine it makes for, I won't say sleepless nights, but maybe a little bit of tossing and turning, getting settled in. And that quest just to secure an opportunity is something that I think can wear on you if you don't keep the right frame of mind about it.
Most definitely. And, as it should. If you really care about something, you're going to have those sleepless nights, no matter if it's going good or bad. And, as someone in the shoes as Sebastian Saavedra, it's great to see him get an opportunity, and he's hoping that would turn out to something. I mean, this is the perfect audition for him. So, I think if he just does a good job, a well performance, and I think he's working hard with some of his past supporters that he's had, especially, with AFS, Gary Peterson. I think if they can pull something together, that would be awesome, because, he's definitely done a great job through Indy Lights, and some of the time that he's been in IndyCar, he showed that he can run well here, so it'd be good to see him in a full-time seat. And, of course, everyone else is just trying hard, is having a little bit of luck, and, that's what we're doing. We're working hard this winter. I think we're in a good position with some of the group that we worked with, the Indianapolis 500, the Indy Women in Tech Championship, to try to push things along and maybe have something for next year, but nothing's certain until it is. So we just got to keep working away, and hopefully in 3 months or so we can say that we have something for next year as well.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that with Zach throughout the course of this show. Let's go back to pit road and Jake Query.
Mike Harding is overlooking that number 88 machine for Gabby Chavez. We talked about the fact you've got Larry Curry across from you, you've got Al Unser Jr. next to you, but let's begin with this. I think you guys, Mike, have been so impressive this year in what you've been able to do to go out, especially in Texas. I thought Indianapolis goes without saying, but here you are at Pocono. Great to see you back. Let's take a look back first off at the year. What things have you been able to accomplish that has pleased you? What things do you feel like you've left out there?
Well, first of all, we started in January, and still with this crew with hardly any time, and I'm just impressed with everyone. So, Gabby Chavez.
I know he's back out on the track now, so I know you'll want to get up there, but I do want to talk about not only the remainder of this season, but next season. Here you are at Pocono. What is the possibility that we'll see you guys out on track again in the remainder of this particular season? And then for next year, where do you stand?
This will be our last race of the season, but we're hopeful that we'll have at least one car team next year, full season.
If you had to put a percentage odds on it, what are the percentage odds that you will be full-time next year at this point?
75%.
Well, you hope you get that other 5%, right? I assume that's probably just a sponsorship possibility, but it's been very impressive this year. Gabby Chavez, I assume, would be the guy as well, correct?
Definitely.
All right, Mike, I appreciate the time. We'll let you get back to work because I know he's back out there. But you guys have been impressive. It's been fun to watch you. Best of luck this weekend in Pocono.
Thank you.
All right, Mike Harding, again, as Gabby Chavez is out. You heard him, 95%. It would be Gabby Chavez next year. I think we can probably say, I don't want to say 100, Mark. We never know about sponsorship and other things that need to come in. Obviously, it helps when you are the name of the racing team, Mike Harding with Harding Racing. But in terms of this year, I think they've done what you would have to expect because of the fact that there hasn't been a lot of cost in terms of damage to race cars. Only 2 races, but bringing them home close bringing them home clean, I should say, both times with top 10s. You do it again at Pocono, and that's obviously what you wanted to set out to do here in a 3-race effort in the 2017 season.
Zach, I remember a couple of years ago after your good friend Matt Brabham had been so dominant in the Mazda Road to Indy, then all of a sudden, I mean, the poor kid just hit a roadblock, and we had him on with us in St. Petersburg and said, and maybe I developed instant respect for Matt Brabham because I said, are you close on anything at all? And he said, I got nothing. He said, I'm not going to lie about it. I'm not close on anything. I got nothing in the works. He said, this is all new to me because he said, I've never had to do this before. He said, I've never had to go out and try to sell myself to people. And, of course, he's had some opportunities since that time. And I think he's having a ball running the Stadium Super Truck Series with Robbie Gordon. I think he was racing jet skis last weekend or something. So, that's just a glimpse of the various sides of it. Guys that might have a little money that can shop it around and guys that just don't have any.
It's tough, and that's something Brabham and I, we actually drove over here together from Indianapolis yesterday, and so we had a good 9.5 hours to talk about, from everything of our season together in Indy Lights back in 2014 to trying to get a ride in the Verizon IndyCar Series. And the more he talks about it, he's having a ball in those Super Stadium trucks. Yeah. I mean, just from the aspect, they just got back from China and he raced over there. Other than having his helmet stolen by a fan, he said it was a pretty good experience over there. But that's what it just comes down to, is it's a lot of doing the right things with a lot of luck on top of it. All of us can work hard and try to do the right things, but without a little bit of luck, it's really, really hard to find the right place. And I think the thing is, just every day you got to keep going a little further than you did the day before. Just put your neck out there, and eventually when things are supposed to happen, they will. And that's kind of how my Indy 500 program came together. It's just luck of the draw. I got a contact from my pastor in Indianapolis, and he gave me an email address to someone he thought I should talk to. And I sent, his name's Dan, an email. We scheduled a call the next day, and within 3 days after that, I had my deal for the 500 done. So just being in the right place, right time, and having the right kind of moment with certain people that can lead to having the moment that gets you back in the race car.
30 minutes into the session, which will run till a quarter past the next hour, and Nick Yeoman at the top of timing and scoring. Some guys that, quite frankly, need to gain a little momentum heading toward 2018. Marco Andretti, P1. Elio, then TK is third quick. Pagano in championship contention, but rounding out the top 5, the 21 of J.R. Hildebrand, who's had some struggles for Ed Carpenter Racing this season.
Yeah, a host of cars making their way into turn number 1 right now. The rest of that top 10, Scott Dixon has shown some speed. He's up above 217 miles an hour. He's 6th fastest. James Hinchcliffe is 7th. Ryan Hunter-Reay is 8th. Alexander Rossi 9th. And Charlie Kimball rounds out the top 10 here, Mark, with 45 minutes to go here in practice from Pocono.
We'll go ahead and give you the full field. Ed Carpenter back in the car this weekend, 11th. 12th is Will Power. Gabby Chavez 13th. Munoz 14th. Chilton 15th. Sato is 16th. Connor Daly is 17th. Joseph Newgardens is 18th. Ed Jones 19th. Sebastian Saavedra is 20th. Graham Rahal is 21st. And Esteban Gutierrez is 22nd quick as preparations continue for Sunday's ABC Supply 500 here at Pocono.
You can't take a 700 horsepower IndyCar out on the road, but you can take the tires. The new Firehawk high-performance tires from Firestone are built with racing-inspired technology and have better wet and dry handling than ever before. Now the only thing missing is a pit crew.
Hi, Dad.
Well, that's a start. Find your perfect Firehawk performance tire at your local Firestone retailer. Whatever you drive a Firestone.
IndyCarRadio.com, your source for info on the radio network and the Verizon IndyCar Series. Weekend schedules, podcasts.
Hey, race fans, this is Nick Yeoman. Check out IndyCarRadio.com for my IndyCar Radio Weekend Rewind. We'll take an in-depth look at the previous race weekend with driver interviews and race highlights. Search for it under the Fans tab.
Plus, listen live to every practice, qualifying session, and race for Indy Lights and IndyCar. IndyCarRadio.com. Log on and get up to speed.
Supply 500 here at Pocono, coming up Sunday on the Advanced Auto Parts IndyCar Radio Network. And a two-day schedule, and Nick, we talked about a little bit earlier with Zach Veach, 1 hour, 15-minute session to start this day. A couple of hours worth of downtime, and then we go qualifying this afternoon, and then one final session late in the day. So certainly not a lot of time if you're chasing an ill-handling race car in this first session.
No, it is. It's a busy Saturday, and as we look at timing and scoring, some of the drivers towards the bottom, some of them you would expect, like Esteban Gutierrez. His only other oval start was at Iowa Speedway. That's nothing like Pocono, so this is really his first chance to get up around 210, 215 miles an hour in an IndyCar. Sebastian Saavedra, you expect them to go through the paces of getting up to speed, but Graham Rahal down 21st quick right now at 212 as he's turned 15 laps. Our points leader, Joseph Newgarden, sits on pit lane. He's turned 14 laps. He's only 18th fastest. So for some of these drivers, Mark, obviously they're going to work through their paces, and everyone's got different strategies throughout the course of this practice session, but a little surprised to see a few of those names down there, as you mentioned. Got to find speed, and you got to find it quick on these two-day race weekends here at Pocono.
Zach, you being on the inside, more so than Nick and I for sure, is I think one of the best stories continues to be the way that Graham Rahal finds himself into championship contention now 2 out of the last 3 years with a one-car team.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive just to see what they can do, because, I mean, let's look at that. A one-car team, you don't have the data from a teammate. You don't have those extra resources that can really help build you up quicker than the other guys. And I think, Graham's done a great job of leading that team. I mean, he's had to be a one-car team and to be competitive. That's your one source of information, so it's had to be good information, Mark. And, for them to be off a little this weekend, I know this year's been a little tough at times for them, strong at Mid-Ohio, but it's just one of those things that I think they're really looking forward to getting to the new car next year, because it's a lot less variables on that. Going back to the standard aero kit in 2018, I believe they'll still probably be with Honda. No silly season talk of that at all, but I think that just makes it a little easier for these one-car teams, especially because then you can really just worry about more of the mechanics of the car, the mechanical setup, than the hundreds of little pieces that you can bolt on to get that extra tenth of a second.
And while Graham has made no bones about his desire to have someone with him, Nick, let's face it, first of all, it's got to be the right person. It's got to make some sense. Second of all, Bobby Rahal has stated this publicly. It needs to make financial sense. Yeah. I mean, it's got to be something that you're able to do from a dollars and cents standpoint. And a few names have been floated out there as potential teammates. But I think I would be surprised just by the fact that language seems to be a little different, a little more direct, with a little more resolve. I would be surprised if they were not, in fact, in some way, shape, or form, a two-car team next year.
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet. And from Bobby Rahal's standpoint or perspective, you got to make sure that you hire the right people too. You don't want to spread yourself too thin by taking some resources away from Graham Rahal and putting them on the pit box of another driver, because Graham's been so strong. You don't want to take that one great car and turn it into a mediocre two-car effort, but it certainly helps. We know it from the mega teams in this sport, Andretti Autosport, Ganassi, Penske, having those resources, having drivers be able to go out and work on different things, try different things, ultimately in the long run only helps. And I think that's what Graham Rahal would like to see, and certainly Bobby Rahal would like to see that as well.
I know, Zach, no matter the form of racing or the level, a win is a win is a win. But when you look at Pocono and up and down the roster of winners here, of course, Open Wheel Racing took a break from Pocono from 89 to 2013. But if you go from 89 back to 71, I mean, Mark Donohue, the template, if you will, for the Penske way, and A.J. Foyt and Johnny Rutherford and Al Unser and Sneva, Bobby Unser, Rick Mears, Danny Sullivan, Mario, Michael. As a driver, you're mindful of that history, I'm guessing, when you come here, and it makes a win here even more meaningful.
Oh, of course. For me, to this day, of course, my win at Watkins Glen was special, but out of everything, Milwaukee Mile, even there in an Indy Lights car, to say that we won there was just incredible for me, because Milwaukee was a place a lot like Pocono where it was challenging. The car was always changing on you. You were always basically having to fight with it the entire time. And the history at Milwaukee is something I kind of like just jumped into. The people that have won there have won the Indianapolis 500 because it was always a close resemblance back in the early days, the 80s. And now Pocono, just as we were talking about how difficult it is because turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 is all different, but I think this really rewards the driver that can handle the most adversity. Because as Michael was saying earlier, it's all about compromise on the setup. You're not going to have that perfect race car here, especially not for 500 miles. So the guys that have a lot of experience, like the Scott Dixons, like the Marios, the ones that have that ability to handle with or perform with an ill-handling car, I think really stands out here at Pocono because so much is changing.
In the return, Nick Yeoman, you talk about teams and success they've either had or haven't had here. For Ganassi Racing, a bit of a surprise. I guess the lone bright spot for them was in 2013. They swept the podium. Dixon, Kimball, and Dario Franchitti. Michael won here in 2015 with Ryan Hunter-Reay. So, again, the return is a bit short, but I think it's safe to say that in terms of drivers with an opportunity to win this weekend, this race presents, I think, a longer list than perhaps any other race on the schedule.
Yeah, I don't think anyone truly has this place mastered or figured out yet. Remember a year ago, as we look at the onboard shot of James Hinchcliffe, that team was so strong. Mikhail Aloshin won the pole and led a ton of laps here before Will Power ran him down and took that win away. Ryan Hunter-Reay charged through the field for Andretti Autosport. As you mentioned, he won here a couple years prior. So this is kind of one of those wide open races, Mark, where you got to take care of that race car. It's 500 miles, so certainly got to make sure you are there at the end. But a lot of different teams have pinned the setup and have found fast race cars here at Pocono Raceway. And just looking at timing and scoring here, Mark, in this practice session, the top 5, we've got 4 different teams represented. Andretti Autosport at P1 with Marco. Team Penske's there with the 2nd and 4th place running Elio Castroneves and Simon Pagenaud. Tony Kanaan waves the banner for Ganassi Racing as he's 3rd fastest, and J.R. Hildebrand is 5th quick for Ed Carpenter Racing. So far, seen a lot of different teams represented towards the top of timing and scoring.
Zach, it looks to be, correct me if I'm wrong, please, this looks to be the most forgiving racetrack. Let's face it, if you don't give someone quote-unquote room, it's just because maybe you're the kind of guy that typically doesn't give, because there's plenty of room here, it seems to be.
I'd say it's the most forgiving racetrack when it comes to traffic with, setting up with cars. When it comes to driver error, I say it's one of the least forgiving tracks we go to for sure, just because turn 1 itself, with it being so banked, the car's so compressed that if it steps out there, usually it's you have to have really quick hands, but most likely you're going to find yourself in the wall on the exit there. But all right, we go back to the famous race here with, I think Montoya won it. Was that 2014 maybe? But it was teammates, him and Will Power, I believe, going into turn 1, took a part of Montoya's wing off, and it's like, well, you have 8 different lanes going into turn 1, so to be able to squeeze someone really says just a more defensive move than anything. So I think you can play nicely here, but mainly so through I'd say turn 2 to the entry turn 1. Turn 1's so fast, especially once it starts getting marbled up through the halfway point of the race. I think we're going to see that turn into a one-lane track, kind of like we did last year if there's no yellow. I know last year we did, close to halfway of the race or even more before there was any yellow, so that really made it into that single lane groove, which was hard to run side by side in places.
Davies weighed in on this from his time spent in the cockpit. We'll ask you to do the same, and of course we understand you're not going to name names because you got to be in the paddock, but I think are more than likely times there are guys that you're pulling up on preparing to pass or attempting to pass. I'm guessing there are indeed guys that you're more comfortable in that situation with than others.
Most definitely. You have your friends out there, and you have the guys that are going to make it a hard time for you. And I think, for me, it's always nice, especially when you're running, well, just from my experience, there's like the guys like Matt or Chavez or someone I was kind of close with, but extremely competitive with, because you knew that you could trust them. But you know, that's one thing, is I've had more time in IndyCar. It's just I have a whole new roster to learn. I have a whole new driver group to figure out, because you know, I only know at the Speedway, I only knew 2 or 3 of the drivers' habits compared to the other 33, because I just haven't had much time running with these guys. And you become used to who you race with, and more time, more comfortable you get, and then you understand it.
Some of the front runners were not happy at all after Mid-Ohio, Nick Yeoman. Esteban Gutierrez, I believe, was one, and Carlos Munoz was another one. Guys that were, you know, deep in the field, but running amongst the front runners and didn't make themselves any too easy to pass, which they're trying to stay on the lead lap, and you get that. But still, you've got guys that are fighting for points and championships, trying to win a race.
Yeah, a lot of talk about the end of that race at Mid-Ohio, with Esteban Gutierrez restarting second in line in between the leader, Joseph Newgarden, and the rest of the drivers that were just hoping for a chance to move and get around him. You're right. Every driver has their spot on the racetrack. They deserve to be out there, but you just have to think about what goes around comes around. If Esteban Gutierrez is ever in a position where he's going for a win, I think he would prefer some of that lap traffic move out of the way. And then the biggest thing was the fact that I think they pitted like 7 or 8 laps after that restart, so that you knew he had to come in for fuel anyways. Would have liked to have seen him get out of the way. At the same point, though, Mark, I don't know if anybody had anything for Joseph Newgarden anyways, even if Gutierrez wouldn't have been there. So would have liked to have seen that handled a little bit differently, but ultimately every team has the right to be out there. It's everyone's racetrack. It's a shared space, and Esteban wanted to try to get back on the lead lap.
You bring up an interesting point, Nick, because I think Joseph Newgarden was the only guy that didn't weigh in on that situation. He seemed to be fine with how things unfolded.
He would have, though, because on that restart, Gutierrez locked him up into turn 4.
That's right.
And I about thought we were going to have a catastrophic mess down there. I think then Joseph might have weighed in, but it didn't matter. Newgarden was just so strong at Mid-Ohio, and it's been a sign of again, things to come throughout the course of the season, as that 2 bunch has gotten better and better. He's got himself in a point to win the championship.
Suddenly, day first, a lot of cars are dotting the pit boxes on pit road with about 30 minutes remaining in this practice session.
Yeah, maybe it's just me, or Jake Query further down pit road can chime in as well on this, but keep in mind, this is an hour and 15-minute practice session. This is the kind of time that we usually don't get week in and week out in the Verizon IndyCar Series, outside of perhaps during the month of May and practice leading up to the Indianapolis 500. So you'd think things would be relaxed down here. You got an hour and 15 minutes to figure things out, but that's definitely not the case at all. This is the only practice before qualifying later today. And so I went up to Tim Cindric just a couple moments ago and said, hey, you got a couple minutes to talk about Joseph Newgarden and the run he's on. He looks at me, shakes his head no. He says, no, talk to me after practice. These guys are getting to it quickly down here. A lot of changes whenever these machines come onto pit road. We're talking of front springs, rear dampers. These cowlings are coming off. Crews are pouring over these cars because time is of the essence right now. And in fact, right now we see further down pit road, Scott Dixon's on pit road, James Hinchcliffe is on pit road, Connor Daly, I'm right here in his pit right now. His crew is pouring over that car, although we do expect to see Connor Daly back out on the racetrack here momentarily. Esteban Gutierrez is on pit road right now. Charlie Kimball, his guys are pouring over that machine. We saw Tony Kanaan earlier. So, yeah, you think it'd be a nice leisurely hour and 15 minutes here on a Saturday morning, but that is definitely not the case here at Pocono.
Zach Veach, the last couple of times we've gotten a good look at the front straightaway, in fact, and we see right now a whole line of cars coming our way, coming the way toward turn 1. We're getting a good look at drivers really tucking up underneath one another, trying to figure out that draft into turn 1.
Well, you can look, a lot of the cars still have like high downforce configuration, you know, the bumper pod winglets, the little tiny wing that you see standing up behind the rear tires still on a lot of the cars. And I think it just goes into a lot of people, they might have done their qual sim out and or they're going to wait till closer to the end of the session just to get an idea of where their car is. But, it's a 500-mile race, Mark. I think we saw it last year, too. A couple of guys that started way in the back, 2 away from last. They were up running in the top 5 a couple stints in. So I think, this is a place where you can pass, you can work your way through the field. So a good race car is going to be way more important than where you qualify, because it doesn't matter if you start on pole. That's not a given guarantee that you're going to win the race. You could start last and be up front at the halfway point here. So these guys just need to figure out what their car needs for the race, and that's what to focus on.
With less than 30 minutes now in this session, track inspection, so they throw the yellow flag. That'll send everybody back to pit road. Jake Query is there with an update.
Yeah, taking a look right now, as a matter of fact, as Dave was talking about, different teams coming in. I'm watching Ed Carpenter's car. He just brought that number 20 machine. Obviously, everyone will now because of the track inspection. But question for Zach. Zach, what I'm curious about is this. There are often times when we get to a racetrack, especially in a weekend that will have a long practice session like this, where tire allotment or just saving your tires comes into play. Now, Firestone gives these teams 13 sets of the Firestone Firehawk tires for the course of the weekend, but with only one practice session, then qualifying, and the race tomorrow, this does not, to me, seem like a weekend where you have to be super careful about your tire preservation and make sure that you're not getting extended time and going through your tires before the weekend. But then again, it is still a 500-mile race, so perhaps you do have to worry about those kinds of things. You would know better than I in terms of just how this track works on that Firestone rubber. Is it of concern for teams, or is 13 a pretty generous allotment?
Well, for me, I look at it as kind of a double-edged sword in a way, because you're going to have a good allotment where you can go through some tires in practice here, but you got to think about it too, is if you don't have much time to get in the way of practice, you want to get some running on used tires here just to see how your tire is going to be through a race stint. So, you're going to want to do some qualifying sims, so run that new tire in at first to see where you're going to be for qualifying here around noon. But, the most important part of it is how your car handles halfway to the end of a stint, because that's where you can make and lose a lot of your time depending on how it's handling. So, for these guys, I think, you focus on what you need for the race, the allotment, save that set, and then just work accordingly what your run plan is. I think a lot of guys here focus on race prep, so I would just be trying to mileage out, the set of tires, or as many as I have for practice this morning and practice this evening, and then just focus on the race from there, because how your car handles throughout the race is going to be the most important part, and if it's working through the tires pretty quickly, you're going to know that you have a problem.
Let's talk a little bit about planning going into a race weekend or into a particular day like you had to do during the month of May, and even going back to Barber when you ran there in the Verizon IndyCar Series. So coming into this particular session, how is the plan put together? When is it shared? When is it discussed? And how soon do you know if you can carry out that prearranged plan, or if you need to punt and go a different direction?
Well, usually, you always have that plan before the session starts, and if the plan goes to plan, it really depends on how the session goes for you, because a lot of the times before the weekend even starts, you know what your allotment is, you know what you have going forward, so you set up a run plan that we're going to do this many changes on this set of tires, bolt on a new set of tires, halfway point of the session, focus on whatever objective is for that time and continue. But a lot of the times is, sometimes you have a track inspection just like we are now, and a lot of the times the track inspections are cued because of something like a cut tire. One of the teams noticed that they got a cut on the racetrack somewhere, so the safety crew goes out to try to find if there's a bolt or a piece of debris out there that could have possibly cut the tire. So when you get one of those cut tires, that's the issue, though, because then you go through your allotment quicker, because you might bolt on a brand new set, go out, run 5 laps, come in, notice that you have a cut tire from track debris, and then you have to scrap that set. So that kind of changes your plan. So you just got to be ready to go on the fly. And I think that's what everyone here in IndyCar is good at, just not only from the schedules that we run, but all the different tracks that we have. It really builds a lot of adversity in these guys, that when something like that happens, you just take it for what it is and move on to what you can change.
Maybe this wasn't so much the case with multi-car teams and Indy Lights, but we have seen it over the course of race weekends, especially on road and street courses with the multi-car teams, in terms of if you have 2, 3, 4 cars at your disposal, you're going to see varying strategies throughout the course of the weekend.
For sure, and we carried that through even in Indy Lights.
Okay.
I know, just to use this track for reference, when we came here, for me, I was always wanted to focus on qualifying, and that kind of was a downfall towards the end of the race here with Gabby Chavez. But I started focusing on qualifying just because I had more experience at the time than Brabham and Indy Lights, and Brabham was working on the race car. So with that, that's good, because you both get a question answered in 2 important categories. So you kind of understand where your car is and what you think you need to go forward, and then you kind of switch back to that race program. So we'd always start off with qual sims early on, go out there and figure out what it was doing. And I think that was even last year, Ryan Hunter-Reay, he had an incident that they had to bring out the backup car for the race, and that's what people were worried about. But his backup car is just as fast as the primary. But that incident was because of a qualifying sim early in the session. So it's just a lot of the teams out here are working on different strategies, and that's the beauty of having that 4-car team versus the 1-car team like we were talking about with Graham Rahal.
Of those 13 sets, some of them with stickers on them, Dave, first, you are seeing them go over the pit wall?
And why not, with what, about 25 minutes, 20 minutes remaining in this practice session. So guys want to see what they can do now that their setups are probably a little more legit. See what they can do with a set of sticker tires and perhaps make a qualifying sim. Remember, it's a 2-lap average here at the Tri-Oval at Pocono later this afternoon. So Connor Daly, they've thrown out a set of sticker black Firestone Firehawks, the same for Charlie Kimball as well. And for those of you interested in this sort of thing, the tire allotment this season, or this weekend, we talked about being 13 sets. The left sides are the same set, that are the same tire chemistry, if you will, the same tires they used at the Indianapolis 500 earlier this year. The right side tires are the same tires they used last year here at Pocono, as well as earlier this season at Iowa. But definitely activity picking up. Some crews thinking about putting some sticker tires on to make those qualifying sims here this morning.
Total of 3 bolts were found on the course by the track inspection, via the track inspection, we should say. So obviously that's problematic. I mean, those Firestone Firehawks, very, very durable. But again, 3 bolts found. That's the reason for the caution for that track inspection. In terms of tire compounds, I don't think there's any question. Zach Firestone does a great job of looking at data, and they'll do it again this year. Once this race is complete, all those engineers up and down pit road for Firestone look at those tires. And of course, you can't come here and do what you do at a lot of racetracks. You won't see fans walk into their cars with a Firestone Firehawk over their shoulder. I mean, they're not going to end up as anyone's coffee table. I mean, they take that data after they turn those tires back in. They're all bar-coded and whatnot, and they use that moving forward for tire compounds.
And that's something I love with Firestone Racing, is that they're so focused on improving their product. It's not something that they find that works and is consistent, and they keep it. Every race they go back, as you said, they go through the data and they say, well, this is great. This was everything we asked it to do, but we could improve it in this small aspect. And I think that's why they perform so well, and they're constantly evolving, constantly improving, and they're improving something that's already almost perfect. So I've really enjoyed my time in coming back to IndyCar and running on Firestone this year. And you're right, they're very protective of their tires. I think it's even a fine and a big issue if a team keeps a tire or someone takes a tire home with them. So it's good to see them focusing on that.
Another update from pit road, this one from Jay Query.
J.R. Hildebrand just went out on scuff tires. Dave first had talked about how a lot of teams electing right now to go ahead and see how the car feels on those sticker or unused, if you will, Firestone Firehawks. That includes Gabby Chavez as well as Sebastian Saavedra, who gets ready to wheel out his number 7 machine. You'll hear that in the background in just a minute. He is flanked in that pit stall just off to my right. To my left, a guy with a pair of top 3 finishes here as Saavedra leaves pit road. He does so just behind the 14 machine of Carlos Munoz, who is pit spotted right in front of him. Munoz has a pair of top 3 finishes here in Pocono in his 3 starts. He has started as high as 3rd. Munoz, of course, sits right now in that 14 machine, but they have the rear cowling off of the car. They're making a spring adjustment. And the other thing, Zach Beach, that I wanted you to kind of add in for people that might look in every once in a while on a pit stop, or if you're walking on pit road as a fan, if you're at the racetrack, maybe you see this on the stream, on the Verizon app or at IndyCar.com. But whenever you see the teams taking that wrench and working either on those spring coils on the back of the car or making an adjustment to that arm, if you will, that connects from the actual rear wheel into the body of the car, theoretically, one would assume, being outside the car, that what they're doing is just simply adjusting the balance, perhaps, or the feel of the race car. But I wanted you to add a little bit on what exactly that means, because that's what they're doing right now on that car of Carlos Munoz. They're changing those springs in the back, and they're working the wrench there just on the left and right side of those rear tires. One would assume that's either tightening or perhaps loosening up that car, but wanted to just kind of get a better perspective as to what it is those teams are doing for Carlos Munoz.
Yeah, well, first off, if you see them wrenching on the damper themselves, a lot of the times they're just adjusting preload. But mostly you'll see them take basically this at the end of the damper completely off so they can pull the spring coil off. And then they'll be adjusting the stiffness or softness of the spring. So they'll be going up 100 pounds, which will be making the car stiffer, or down 50 pounds, which will be making that corner softer. And then they will be screwing that piece back on to hold the coil in place so it can accept the load of the car. And anytime you see a crew guy that is wrenching on the push rod, as you were talking about, the piece that connects the damper to the wheel assembly itself, they're adjusting ride height. So we can do turns they call flats on that to adjust the ride height of the car. So if you go up on flats, you're basically raising the ride height. And if you go down on flats, you're going to be lowering the ride height. And that's something that always goes hand in hand, because if you think about, if you make the rear of the car softer, usually the car itself can't hold itself up as high. So you need, we have a crash there. It's one of the, looks like Ed Carpenter maybe.
Yeah, that is Ed Carpenter, the 20. Yeah, right off of turn number 3, and that is a heavy, heavy hit to the outside of turn number 3.
Outside left front, looks like he must have lost the car, spun it around, and that side came back in to collect the wall.
Good news for Ed and fans of Ed Carpenter. Those of you not watching and simply listening, he's already disconnecting everything, and he's popped the steering wheel off early down the race car. Zach, you're watching it as it happened.
Yeah, just close 3/4 the way through turn 3, and he just lost the rear and completely did a 180 as he was pulling through the exit of the corner, and the left side of that race car just lined up perfectly with the retaining wall right as it starts straightening up for the straightaway. So looked like a pretty hard hit for him. Just the whole left side of that car is destroyed. And
not to speculate, but could that relate to the fact that that was a sticker set, maybe not enough heat built up?
Well, I look at it as, if he was running on his own, it looked like he had a car slightly in front of him, but maybe he was trying to do a qualifying sim. I couldn't see what his downforce level was when he hit the wall. But, if you're going a sticker set, it would make sense to do that qual sim with 16 minutes we have left before qualifying, because you're going to have to know what that balance is when you go to push it here around noon.
But now, I'm thinking it might be difficult to get a quote-unquote true qualifying sim and not get a tow because of the fact that it's a pretty busy racetrack. Is it hard to get out there and get cleaned by yourself?
It's tough. That's why you always try to go, if people are going to be sitting around once the track goes green again, you try to go out right away to try to find that clean air, but it's difficult. But as we looked, he still had the bumper pod winglets on, and the rear main plane didn't look too trimmed out, so I don't think necessarily that was the case. Maybe he just lost the car on his own, but the crew's going to have a tough time. They're going to have to get that backup car ready, and they're going to have a lot on their hands to get it ready for qualifying.
So caution on the course. Ed Carpenter, hits the wall. Then turn number 3, happy to report that Ed got out of the car under his own power, and Jake Query is headed back to medical. Hopefully we can find out more from Ed exactly what happened. But as Zach Feet said, some work to do for that Fuzzies team for sure. Andretti, Castroneves, Canan Pagano, Hildebrand, then Dixon, Carpenter, Hinch, Ryan Hunter-Ray, Alexander Rossi, the top 10 as preparations continue for the ABC Supply 500 here at Pocono.
During the 1969 Indy 500, Mario Andretti's crew couldn't get his tire to come off, so he had no choice but to keep driving on it. That tire held up the whole race and took Mario to the winner's circle. Right, Mario?
That's right. If it wasn't for the dependability of Firestone tires, I wouldn't be an Indy 500 champion.
Here's to making more champions with the official tire of the Verizon IndyCar Series. Whatever you drive, drive a Firestone.
IndyCarRadio.com, your source for info on the radio network and the Verizon IndyCar Series.
This is Jake Query. You want to get to know your favorite IndyCar driver? Now it's easy. Just go to IndyCarRadio.com. I'll ask them 6 fast questions to help you find out what they're like when they're not in the race car. Search for it under the Fans tab at IndyCarRadio.com.
Plus, listen live to every practice, qualifying session, and race for Indy Lights and IndyCar. IndyCarRadio.com. Log on and get up to speed.
Turn 3 is the site of the incident involving Ed Carpenter with about 15 minutes remaining in this session. Some pieces and parts, debris, race control designated it as light contact, but they have it on the hook and starting to get it off the racetrack now. We have some downtime here. Let's talk to some folks. Dave First has caught up with Larry Foyt.
Larry Foyt, a couple of races ago, moved down to the 4 with Connor Daly, and perhaps we're already seeing some results, a little momentum. Did a nice job at Mid-Ohio. What are you guys working on here in this remaining 10 minutes or so here, Larry?
Yeah, just getting laps, for Connor, really. This is a place he doesn't have a ton of experience at, so just kind of sneaking up on it, working on our package, trying to take things we learned at Indianapolis, obviously, and some of the other big tracks, trying to apply it and see what's working and what's not. So unfortunately, we're still kind of new to the Chevy on these types of tracks, so still learning for us even late in the season.
Tell me a little bit more about that, because many would think, well, it can't be that much of a change, but for you guys specifically, the move to Chevy, you guys are catching up a little bit, aren't you?
Oh yeah, no, it was surprised. We were surprised too, because you think it's only aero. Our mechanical setup should have applied better, but they were different. But also we have different drivers, and so those guys have different feels. And what we've been developing with Takuma over years for him, now these guys like a different feel. So just our deal came together late with the limited testing. We just put our backs up against the wall. But I think we've shown some improvement here late, which is great, and just working on getting another solid run for Connor.
I was going to say, Connor did a really nice job a couple of weeks ago. It feels like a month or so ago. But anyway, Mid-Ohio, when he came home 10th, is he heading the right direction, you think, right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what, we just wanted to switch it up. I came down here just to see how things operate and work with Connor a bit. And I think we've been working well together. And like you said, that was a solid weekend for us all around, which we needed. We got in the top 12 qualifying and then had a top 10 race. So certainly not what we want, but the ABC car ran good all day. We're excited to be here at Pocono. We got 1,500 ABC associates coming, so we're looking for a good weekend here.
I'm sorry, how many?
Yeah, 1,500. So,
that's great.
Yeah, no, they're great. And they sponsor the race, so super sponsor. And it's been a tough year, I know, for them and us, but we're in this together, and we'll get it turned around for them.
Let me ask you this real quickly. It's silly season right now. Rumors are flying around, this and that and the other. Where are you guys when you look at 2018 right now?
Yeah, I think we have a direction and we're headed that way. So obviously I think some big announcements are going to drop for some teams next week. And then our stuff, the one thing I didn't want everything to come together late like it did last year. So we're way ahead of the game, already working on next year and our testing plan and all that. So we'll have news as well.
We'll keep an eye on it. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
All right, Larry Foyt, again, calling the shots for Connor Daly. Back to the medical center with Jake Query.
Outside the Lehigh Valley Health Network, and Ed Carpenter has come out. That's the good news, is it looks like you're okay. But take me through, Ed, just what happened there in turn 3.
I don't know. I mean, the car had felt pretty good. Graham was coming in the pits in front of me and slowing up. So I don't know. I maybe lifted a little bit for him slowing down to keep the gap, and may have shifted the balance. We just made a change, but thought it had felt good up to that point. So frustrating, not the start we wanted for the Fuzzies Vodka Chevrolet, but we'll just have to rebound, and it's early in the weekend, we can recover from it still.
Okay, two-part question. The first being, it was a long practice session, obviously. Did you get enough time and enough laps to get a real feel for what you need in terms of qualifying?
I mean, we were doing all race running, so didn't get anything like that in. We'll have to rely on what JR does here for that. But, I was feeling pretty good with where the car was up until that point, so we'll just have to take a look at everything and make some decisions.
Have you gotten any word yet or any way to assess the damage of the car?
I mean, it wasn't good. It got the whole right side, so, it'll be underwing, suspension. The real question with hits like that is if it gets the engine or gearbox. So still coming back on the hook now, so we'll find out.
Appreciate the time.
Thanks.
Ed Carpenter, guys, and again, they now have added 7 minutes to this session. That's because, of course, it got a little bit fractured, not only because of that incident involving Ed Carpenter as he goes to take a look now at that number 20 machine and see the damage of it, but also in addition to that, keep in mind that we had just had a track inspection just because of a couple of bolts that were found out on the track. So as a result of that, it's my understanding, Mark, that 7 minutes will be added to this practice session, which was to end at a quarter after the hour, and it now looks like that'll be shortly after 20 after.
Yep, that's exactly right. So because of the fact that other than a couple of vintage series, this is primarily the main event this weekend, if you will. So that gives them some scheduling flexibility, unlike some weekends when we have the entire Mazda Road to Indy and sports cars and whatnot. So Zach, interesting comments and observations from Ed Carpenter. So, from a driver's perspective, if you don't indeed know what happened immediately, do you try to find out as quickly as you can, and what are some of the ways in which you can determine exactly what happened?
I think so, for sure, because that's the one way of making sure it doesn't happen again is knowing what happened in the first place. And the quickest way is the data never lies. You can have onboard camera and you can kind of see it happen, but for you, that's just reliving the moment. Looking at data is easier because it's just a bunch of lines, and you're like, okay, well, that's when I hit the wall. But the important thing is the data can show you everything leading up to it. So, for me, Indy, my hit there was just mainly because we were fully trimmed and small lift in the corner, and when I did do that lift, it just transferred weight forward the front end bit, and that's when it came around and got to the wall. And you can see that perfectly in the data because you can see the small lift, you can see the immediate correction, you can see the weight going forward, and then the rest is, just occurrence from that. So I think the easiest way to identify what happened is looking at the dampers, because you can see all the data, because you can see all the load on the tires, the load on the dampers, and what the driver did and how that reacted or made the car react from his input and how he found the wall. So that's always the easiest way. The drivers don't like the data because most times, 9 out of 10, it shows that it was driver error in a way. But it's also helpful because you can tell if it was a mechanical failure. You can see the load sensor and you see, wow, well, the right rear just dropped in the middle of the corner. Well, that's because something broke, and that's why the car hit the wall. So you can really tell a lot from the computers.
I always find it amazing with these race cars, as you talked about, and Ed kind of seems like that might have been the issue. Of course, there's going to be times when you trim these cars out and you're full throttle and the car just snaps. But as you pointed out, there can be times where you're even off the throttle and the balance goes off of these race cars. I mean, it seems like finding that happy medium, you're on the edge all the time.
The crazy thing is, if you're super trimmed out and the car's already on edge and you do that small, 10-20% lift, all you do is carry, say 30-40 pounds to the front tires, and that extra 30-40 pounds is enough to throw what already was slightly edgy over the line to, you cross it and then there's no returning from it. So that's something as a rookie that you really have to learn, because the lights cars don't really get that far down the road or that far out of control. But once you get an IndyCar, everything is magnifying. What you do is 10 times more important than what you could do in an Indy Lights car, and I think that's one of the big things to learn as you step into the Verizon IndyCar.
So clock continues to tick, and boy, Nick Yeoman, I can imagine what it's like from a team and a driver's perspective. You think initially that hour and 15 minutes gives you plenty of time, and Nick, all of a sudden the sand is out of the hourglass, and you're just looking at a handful of minutes now. I guess if you're, guys like Ryan Hunter-Reay and Marco Andretti, Scott Dixon, and Rossi, pretty comfortable. So it looks like Andretti, at least initially, has this place figured out. Maybe if you're at the rear of the field, not so much. But again, Ed Carpenter brings up something. We asked him, how's the car going to be in qualifying? He said, we're not sure because we had done nothing but race simulations to that point. So that speaks to Zach's earlier point about the plan of action going into this session.
Boy, had a near miss there going into turn 3 between Max Chilton and the 14 of Carlos Munoz. Zach, you saw that. Those two, we talk about this track's plenty wide, but they were both going for the same bit of real estate there.
Well, as a driver, it's always someone else's fault. So, that real estate is your real estate in your mind, no matter who's in it. So I just think they got a little bit close. Didn't see it completely, but Max definitely put his hand out and said hello to Munoz as we see Munoz going around Max again. So these two are not having so much fun with each other right now.
Back to pit road and Dave first.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about these qualifying sims that some teams are trying to get in if they can find some clean racetrack out there, and that's going to include Helio Castroneves, who just now left pit road. Simon Pagenaud, he's got a set of sticker blacks on as well. A fresh set of tires for James Hinchcliffe. Alexander Rossi just made his way back to pit road after doing a qualifying sim. You guys upstairs can look at the timing and scoring. Scott Dixon also just completed a qualifying sim, so they're looking ahead to qualifying here this afternoon.
They are indeed. So let's I'll tell you what, Nick, let's go ahead and give them a full field rundown. I'll start with the top 10. Hunter-Reay, Andretti, Dixon, by the way, 219, 268, Andretti, Dixon, Rossi, Helio, the top 5. Then Kanaan, Pagenaud, Hildebrand, Kimball, and Ed Carpenter.
Yeah, the rest of the running order right now, James Hinchcliffe, he just got bumped down to 12th as Takuma Sato pops into 10th. That moves Carpenter down to 11th. James Hinchcliffe is 12th. Will Power is 13th fastest. Max Chilton is 14th. Carlos Munoz just posted the 15th fastest time. Gabby Chavez is 16th quick. Graham Rahal is 17th. Connor Daly is 18th fastest. Joseph Newgarden is 19th. And we've got one car spinning. That is Ed Jones, who has spun exiting turn number 1 down the straightaway. Out of turn number 1, that Dale Coyne Honda comes to a stop right in the middle of the racetrack. Looks like he's got some front end damage to that Boy Scouts of America Honda for Dale Coyne Racing. That's actually out of the tunnel turn. That car steps out, Zach, and he does not very heavy contact, but that's an odd spot to see drivers get sideways over the last couple years here at Pocono.
I mean, to be honest, as long as it didn't get too far into the front nose cone and tub the car, if you're going to spin on an oval and hit something, that's the best way to do it. We see him lose the car in the middle of turn 2, spin completely around to where his nose is facing the outside retaining wall, and just the nose hits the wall and keeps him sliding forward. So I don't know if he's got too much damage there. The car looks reasonably fine, but that's, as Ed Carpenter kind of alluded to earlier, there's so much force no matter how you hit on these ovals that shock load can go through the car and damage a lot of things without even appearing broken.
So a relatively uneventful session for the first hour plus, Zach, and now we go back to back, very similar looking incidents. Can we work under the assumption that maybe pushing the edge a little bit, looking for as much speed as they can in a qualifying sim?
Yeah, well, as we get another replay from that, it honestly looks like Ed just got too low through 2. Unless something broke, but we saw Ed Jones get down to the apex of the corner. We can't see exactly how low he was, but you do see some sparks come out from behind the car, so that's a sign that he bottomed pretty hard in the middle of 2, and then he lost the car. So it could be 3 things. He got too low below the yellow line. That stepped the rear of the car out. The car was too low in general, and that was one of his first laps, and he just bottomed and lost it. Or something could have broke, and that's why we saw the sparks, because the car just got back onto the racetrack with the tub. So really we won't have a for sure answer until we talk with him, but could have been a lot worse. I mean, to hit on an oval, that's the way to do it, I'd say.
Nick, no question, it looks as though, at least initially, that his crew probably won't have quite as much work to do as their crew of Ed Carpenter. It looks like all of the damage seemed to be confined to the front nose cone on that car.
Going to need a new set of Firestones for sure, though, as he flattened those spinning through turn number 2. And for Ed Jones, this is one of the racetracks he hasn't had a chance to race at. Of course, our defending Indy Lights champion gets the opportunity to race at a lot of the same racetracks that the IndyCar Series did a year ago. This is not one of them. Indy Lights is not here this weekend and hasn't been for a couple years. So for Ed Jones, it's a learning opportunity and experience for him. This is not the way they were looking to end this practice session.
Two-time Indy 500 champion here this weekend, as he is most weekends in his various capacities with the Verizon IndyCar Series. Talking about Arie Luyendyk. Dave First has caught up with him on pit road.
Here with Arie, usually up in race control. You came down here to check things out a little bit, and you would think, I would think, two-time Indy 500 champion, you love going fast. I thought you would have done pretty well here at Pocono, but you're saying what?
I didn't do so well, but just thinking about it as we are waiting to go online here, I finished 4th in the 500, the Pocono 587, had a decent race, but I had my first injury in IndyCar that was here. I had some, I bruised my legs, my ankles were, I had some hairline fractures in them. I didn't have to be operated on, but I was on crutches for 6 weeks. So that happened here in Pocono. And then I believe 1 year I was pretty quick, but we dropped out.
So you hate coming back to Pocono then?
No. In fact, back then I really liked the track. I liked the 3 different turns. You had to really, you had to have a compromise on your setup because each turn is so different. And the tunnel turn back then was really exciting. I mean, it was really bumpy, and to take it flat, that really only happened in qualifying when you really went for it on new tires.
The whole track was bumpy. In fact, you were telling me that bolts and stuff would come off the old fencing that was around this facility.
Yeah, there was just a lot of stuff that would accumulate behind that boilerplate, and then when the cars would drive around, that stuff would work itself loose. And back then we had a lot of punctures, but obviously they fixed up the track really well, so it's a great facility right now.
And we're all honored to be back at this facility as well. How difficult is this place to figure out?
I think it's very difficult because turn 3 is flat with no banking, and then you get turn with a ton of banking. I don't know how much banking. And then turn 2 is kind of in between, so it's like I said.
You say it's like Indianapolis, but maybe not?
I don't know about that. No, it's a bit different because you have quite a big difference between turn 3 and turn 1 as far as banking and setup.
Hey, we'll let you get back to work. Thanks for the chat.
All right, thanks, man.
Always awesome to talk to the two-time Indy 500 champion, Arie Luyendyk. Loves going fast, but sadly has some rough memories of this facility.
Thanks, Dave. Good stuff with the two-time 500 champion for sure. Jake Query, you can give us an update now on Ed Jones' situation.
Goes without saying that they're going to go ahead and just take that car back into the paddock area. No sense in bringing it back here because of the fact that we are in the waning moments of this particular session. But the explanation was really a pretty simple one. They just simply said, hey, the rear end, the balance of that car came out from behind Ed Jones. He lost a little bit of control and made that contact at the front, but there was not a whole lot of concern about the damage to the race car itself. So they're going to go and take that back. The team is doing what they usually do in these situations, just kind of casually boxing things up. But it is not of over concern. The good news is it doesn't look like Ed Jones suffered any sort of an injury, and that car, I think, is one that they'll probably replace, of course, that nose of the car and then get that car ready for qualifying. But as far as this practice session, you can hear those engines fire up. We've got just a couple of minutes left, Mark, so a last chance opportunity for these teams to perhaps work on the right kind of setup for qualifying or see how those cars work on those Firestone brand new sticker Firehawk tires.
We have the benefit, of course, of a multi-screen monitor up here, even though we can see all the way around this place from our view high atop the start-finish line. But Nick Gilman, we have those vantage points that are aesthetically pleasing because of the surroundings, places like Long Beach and St. Pete and whatnot. And, maybe turn 3 at Toronto comes to mind. But I'll tell you, from a pure racing standpoint, aesthetically, your vantage point in turn one is about as cool as it gets because of how incredibly wide not only the straightaway is, but how wide that racetrack is when these cars come off of pit road as they head toward turn one.
Well, and just how fast that they're hauling the mail down the front straightaway, too. I mean, they're going 220, 230 miles an hour before they arc it into turn number one. And as you mentioned, they've gone 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wide at times over the last few years. So it's a cool vantage point. You can see it all coming right at you from down there in turn number one. I'm always surprised they haven't put grandstands down there. They've got a massive one here on the front straightaway, but that's a pretty cool view. And as you mentioned, I'm there in the wilderness, Mark, out there amongst the trees and Mother Nature and oftentimes some critters at times over there in turn number one. It's a pretty cool vantage point there, right up against the racetrack, looking over the fence.
Yeah, our network director and former engineering assistant Alan Bauer were out the first year we came here, I think, out in Jake's position in turn two, and Wally watched AB step on a snake and warned him about it after he had stepped on it, I think. But, a couple of the observers from IndyCar told me that they saw a little bear cub out in your area in turn one a couple of years ago. So yeah, you're getting back to nature when you come.
It's not a bear cub anymore.
No, I was going to say.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. If I see it, I'm a little worried.
We'll find out what your 40 time is, aren't we? If you see a bear out there for sure. So we're hoping for an uneventful finish to this session. As we said, we went a little over an hour or so without any issues whatsoever. And Ed Carpenter in turn three and Ed Jones off of turn number two. In terms of this racetrack, we've talked a lot about the characteristics and whatnot. So let's try to let the fans climb in the cockpit a little bit. Zach, for instance, we're watching Ryan Hunter-Reay set up for turn number one. Is a track walk as much a part of this as it is a road and street course, or do you go back and you look at film, or do you talk to the engineering staff or whatever? How do you get those points in terms of where you should make entrances to the turns and where you can and can't go to the bottom of the turn and things of that nature?
Yeah, for ovals, we usually always just go to the video. A street or road course, you usually do the walk because there's so much more to take in. But, with an oval, one of the best things to do is just watch the video so you can understand where the driver's turning in. You'll see if you're watching online here, as Hunter-Reay goes into turn one here, there's these white squares throughout the corner. You can see one, there's 3 of them. And you basically use those as your marker through the corner. So, turn one, you want the first square, this was an lights car anyway, to be like in the middle of the car. You want the right tires to touch the square in the middle. Then you kind of want your left side tires to touch the third square on exit. And those are some of the things that you just kind of follow and you hit every lap around here. But to be in the cockpit, I think it might have been Ari or Michael that said it best, is turn one so daunting here because it is a longer straightaway than the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and it's so banked that you feel like you're going down the straightaway for so long. You're going up to 220 miles an hour, and then you're just jumping and diving into turn one, and that can be a little intimidating at first because it just seems like there's no way the car is going to stick in that corner, but it always does.
It may be an issue for the 5 of James Hinchcliffe. He made a very slow lap as the checkered flies on this session.
Yeah, that was weird to see Hinchcliffe way off the pace and down below the apron in between turns 1 and 2. Here's the thing I've noticed, though, Mark. Remember back to the Indy 500, probably the closest track, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, probably the closest one that resembles this 2.5-mile triangle. It was Andretti Autosport with Fernando Alonso and Rossi and Hunter-Reay. Obviously, they had some engine problems, but they were so strong, and then ultimately Takuma Sato wins the Indianapolis 500. Take a look at timing and scoring. All 4 of the Andretti Autosport cars are in the top 6. Honda goes 1 through 6 with Tony Kanaan and Scott Dixon joining them. So clearly, Mark, the Honda boys and Andretti Autosport in particular, they've showed up with guns ready to fire off as they look to kind of put behind what's been an up and down season. You got the Indy 500 win, but not much else to show for it. But boy, those Andretti Autosport Hondas have been fast.
Now, I know, Zach, it's well stated that with a 500-mile race and a track as unforgiving as this one is, perhaps not as much of a premium should be placed on qualifying, or is it placed on qualifying? You can start from deep in the field and have a shot, but let's face it, especially on the start, you'd rather not be back there.
Well, the whole reason that you don't want to start back there, it seems to be anytime something happens on the start, it's usually that middle group. Because, the leaders, the first couple rows have the opportunity to get away usually. Pocono's a little different because the front straightaway is so wide. Even if you're back in the third or fourth row, it feels like you can get that draft and, kind of try to work your way up into the top 6. But for these guys, if you're starting in the back, middle to the back, you just kind of want to give yourself that extra room. Know that you're going to get through turn 1 cleanly and go racing because, as we've seen before, even the Indy 500, really the first to 3 stints, you're just trying to do the little tweaks in your car to get it where you want it. You want to stay on the lead lap in that time, but it doesn't really matter where you're at as long as you're keeping your nose out of trouble because, it's not going to matter until we get to the 6th or 7th stint, that last stop, and go racing because you can find your way up front pretty quickly here if you got a good race car.
So, Nick Yeoman, what they have is what they have. Give us the schedule for the rest of this day and then into tomorrow.
Yeah, before, let's check in down on pit lane Dave first. You've caught up with the driver who ends this practice session third fastest.
Yep, Tony Kanaan, the 10 car, finishing third in this practice session. Look ahead to qualifying, just climbed out of the car. How was that?
That was okay. I mean, it was hard to get a clean run in qualifying trim, with the two crashes. We always leave that to the end, but good start. So go back and think about what we need to do for qualifying, and then back this afternoon to see what we need to do for the race.
It's a crazy practice session. Just one, and then you come back and qualify this afternoon.
Yeah, and then you have the warm-up today instead of tomorrow. So it's, that's the 2-day event thing, which, we're used to it. We've done it all year long, so it's the nature of the beast.
Good start to the weekend. Have fun this afternoon.
Thank you.
Tony Kanaan, third.
Not sure that was necessarily a ringing endorsement for the 2-day schedule out of Tony Kanaan, but let's talk more about that 2-day schedule, Nick Yeoman.
Yeah, of course, this practice session in the books will go qualifying later this afternoon at 12:55 Eastern Time. The full crew will be up to cover qualifying as the 22 drivers sort out where they'll start for Sunday's race. We'll have a 30-minute practice session to end the day at 5 o'clock Eastern, and then on Sunday, the ABC Supply 500 here from Pocono Raceway at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. Mark.
Back to pit road and Jake Query.
And Hunter Ray is out of that DHL machine. I know he's got to weigh in, but I'll tell you what, in terms of clocking in, pretty good times. Obviously, looks like you guys have a pretty good setup here. Just take me through that session and the challenges of this track.
Yeah, first time back in a year. We didn't test here this year, so always great to be back at Pocono, but we're just trying to get a feel for, the new tire compound, the track after, a hard winter as they always have here. So bumps are a little bit different, things are a bit different, but it's just a reacclimation session, and then you have everybody getting ready for qualifying. So you got everybody on completely different levels of downforce, so it's really tough to tell where you stand. I think this afternoon's or this evening's session we'll get a better feeling for that.
Appreciate it. Ryan Hunter Ray will let him go, of course, weigh in. They've got 15 minutes once they get out of the car to go weigh in before there's any sort of a penalty. Ryan Hunter Ray is going to do exactly that, but these cars obviously very good for Andretti Autosport. We heard from Michael Andretti about the fact that Nazareth, of course, was always the home track, but Pocono still one very important, and obviously they've got a pretty good stable here for those Andretti Autosport cars, Mark.
Ryan Hunter Ray is P1. Thanks, Jake. Pagano, Kanaan, Andretti, Dixon, Sato, Rossi, Rahal, Castroneves, Chavez, the top 10. Things continue for Harding Racing. Hildebrand 11th, Chilton 12th, Kimball, Munoz, Carpenter the top 15, Hinch, Gutierrez, Powers, Saavedra, Newgarden, Daly, and Jones. Couple of cautions, one for debris, one contact. Pretty heavy. Ed Carpenter in turn number 3. His crew working to effect repair so he can go qualifying. Same for Ed Jones. His in turn 2. Front wing assembly damage for that car. The team should be able to get all of those repairs made and get ready to go qualifying at 12:55 when you can join us here. The director of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Radio Network and the Advanced Auto Parts IndyCar Radio Network's Wally Levitt. Our on-site producer and engineer is Rick Evans. Stay first, Jake Query. Good stuff from pit road. Zach Veach with us as our driver analyst this weekend. Joined me in the booth today along with Nick Yeoman. This is Mark Janes again inviting you to join us 12:55 Eastern this afternoon as we go qualifying in preparation for the ABC Supply 500. I'm Mark Janes. So long for now from Pocono.
IndyCar Radio on the IMS Radio Network.
A.J. Foyt down the main straightaway. The checkered flag is out. A.J.'s hand in the air. He is the winner. A.J. Foyt at Indianapolis has won his fourth 500-mile race. Foyt, our winner. The flag will fly now for Tom Stava and then for Al Unser. We will be talking with all of these